You know, I don't want to talk too much about the Federal Reserve, but I can't get by without mentioning it. I still have, my position still is that I'm still in favor of ending the Fed. But I tried to keep learning about the Fed and the intrigue of what goes on. And matter of fact, I came up with a new book that I'm in the middle of reading, and I have found some new facts and figures about the Fed. And it's called Deception at the Fed. Believe me, there's even more deception at the Fed than I ever realized. But a few points that has been pointed out so far in my reading is that he comes up and explains where the money came from on the cash that they handed out after the Watergate break-in from the Federal Reserve. That's where they got the cash. And when they needed cash, during the 1980s, when we were on the side of Saddam Hussein and we wanted him to fight the Iranians, so we helped him, and he got a special loan of $5.5 billion. And it wasn't authorized by the Congress. It was no authority from the Congress. It was done through the Federal Reserve System. And then later on, when we decided he was a bad guy and we didn't want to associate with him anymore, and he wasn't doing what he was told to do, so we started bombing him. And then eventually, after 10 years of bombing, we felt it was pretty safe. We weakened them. A lot of children died. A lot of people, a lot of civilians died. We felt we weakened the country enough that we could invade them. And indeed, we did in 2003. And we had a provisional government. And I know you must have mostly heard the stories about the cash going in. Tons of cash, truckloads of cash. Never appropriated, came out of special funds, orchestrated through the Federal Reserve System, shipped it over there, and there was one story that said that there were $12 billion never accounted for in cash. So I would say that just knowing that, if the American people just knew those kind of stories, it would be enough to at least get a clean audit of the Federal Reserve System. And that may come, but it's still going to be tough. We got it passed in the House. The Senate has not yet passed it. We don't know what they will do. There's a lot of hurdles to go over yet after that, because if it passed in the Senate, it goes to a conference, and it may get deleted in the conference. Then the president has to sign it. And then, you know what? Then it goes to the courts. And the courts, if you look back, I think about maybe there's been 20 rulings on central banking in this country. One ruling was in favor of the people and against central banking, and that was reversed a few years later. That was one in the Civil War period. So the courts aren't going to protect us either. So one thing that I've worked on over the years, whether it's medical care or education or the monetary system, the main thing that if we could just retain the ability to get around the government, legalize at least a small area of freedom for us. In schools, make sure that we can have homeschooling in private schools. And in medical care, what would be so bad? You heard a lot of talk about the public option. We're going to have the public option. Yeah, well, people woke up and figured it wasn't going to be too good of an idea. But how many times did you hear them on TV saying, are you going to make sure we have a private option as well? No, they don't talk about that. But I would like a private option in the monetary system. I would like to legalize competition. But that's radical, because that means you would legalize the Constitution, Legalize gold and silver. You'd have to repeal the legal tender laws, their monopoly control, and get rid of the tax laws that said, gold and silver, that's money, but we're going to tax it. There's a sales tax on that kind of money, and there's a capital gains tax on that kind of money. You'd have to repeal that. And we could do that if people were allowed to use that. You could have a transition. Unfortunately, I work in that directions, believing that that's what we should do, is set our goals and strive for them. Even in foreign policy, I have goals like, let's just come home from overseas. But the problem is we don't have enough votes over there, and so far we don't have the right president yet over there to do this job. So I work on the assumption that most likely what's going to happen is this financial crisis that we're in, rather serious, is nothing like a currency crisis where the dollar is rejected. Then they won't be able to pay the bills. The troops will come home because they can't be paid. The entitlement system collapses. And then there will be no more debates about nullification and interposition. It'll be de facto. The government will become, so inept, they will become irrelevant, and the people will just go take care of themselves. Recently, we've read in the papers about the bankruptcy of Greece. I mean, that's just one country. They're just a little worse than the rest. But they've had some discussions over there whether the European Union and the European Central Bank would bail out Greece. And they said, yeah, we're going to help them, but we don't want to tell you what we're doing. Now, I can't prove it, but I'd be willing to bet a little bit if we had an audit of the Fed and knew exactly what they're doing. I bet they're very much involved in those discussions, putting the burden not on the European Union, but probably on the American taxpayer. But there'll be a limit to all that, and that limit, we're reaching it. Whether it's the attack on our civil liberties, whether it's the insanity of the spending and the deficits, the insanity of the monetary system, or the ridiculous foreign policy we have, it will come to an end for a couple reasons. One, we won't be able to afford it, but also there's a revolution going on in this country, and they're going to hear from us. The truth is, if you had asked me a couple years ago, 2 years ago, whether or not we would be where we are today, I would say no. I was getting pretty used to talking to an empty chamber and not getting many responses, and I didn't understand how many of you were out there listening. And already well along your path of understanding. So there were many more who had already been converted and striving and fighting and just hoping that this would come alive. And also, I never realized how positively the young people respond. This is what has really excited me about how the campuses now are looking at what we're doing.